Well, good morning. It's Thursday, March 25th, and we are gathered for our morning devotion. And today's Mark reading is the entire chapter 13, but the focus is 1 through 23. As they were going out of the temple, one of Jesus' disciples said to him, "Teacher, look at these huge stones and these huge buildings." "You see these enormous buildings," Jesus said? "There will be not one single stone left on top of another. They will all be torn down." Peter, James, John, and Andrew approached him privately as he was sitting at the Mount of Olives opposite the temple. "Tell us," they asked, "when will these things happen? What will be a sign of these things that are about to be completed?" "Take care that no one deceives you," Jesus began to say to them. "Plenty of people will come in my name saying, 'I am the one,' and they will lead plenty astray. But whatever you hear about wars and rumors about wars, don't be disturbed. These things have to happen. But it doesn't mean the end is here. One nation will rise up another nation. One kingdom will rise against another. There will be earthquakes from place to place and famines too. These are the first pains of childbirth. But watch out for yourselves. They will hand you over to courts. They will beat you into synagogues. You will stand before rulers and kings because of me as a witness against them. And the message of the kingdom must first be announced to all nations. And when they put you on trial and hand you over, don't look out beforehand what you are going to say, but say whatever is given to you at that moment. It won't be speaking, you see, but it will be the Holy Spirit. One brother will hand over another to death. Father will hand over children. Children will rebel against parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated by everyone because of my name. But the one who is patient through the end, that one will be saved." However, Jesus continued, "When you see the desolating abomination set up where it ought not to be, then those who are in Judea should run away to the mountains. If you're on a housetop, don't go down. And don't go in to get anything from the house. If you're out in the countryside, don't turn back to pick up your cloak. It will be a terrifying day for pregnant and nursing mothers. Pray that it won't happen in winter. Yes, these days will bring trouble like nothing that's ever happened from the beginning of creation, which God created until now or ever will. In fact, if the Lord had not shortened the days, no one would be rescued. But for the sake of his chosen ones, those whom he appointed, he shortened the days. So at that time, if somebody says, 'Look, here's the Messiah,' or 'Look, there he is,' don't believe them, because false messiahs and false prophets will arise and will perform signs and portents to lead astray even God's chosen ones, if they were possible. But you must be on guard. I've told you everything ahead of time. I have inherited my father a splendid old set of 19th century books. This particular set is a collection of writings and drawings from the old humorous magazine called Punch, which ran well for over a century and with its inception in 1841 before folding sadly in 1992. The books reflect the early part of that time. Many of the articles are period pieces, some witty and worth reading in both in themselves and as a document, now of social history. Many of the cartoons, too, have retained their quirky humor. Indeed, it was Punch that helped to popularize the modern wording of the word cartoon as a humorous drawing or illustration. Before then, the word had simply referred to the preliminary sketch that an artist or architect might make up before producing a finished product. But some of these cartoons are completely opaque to me now. They depend entirely upon from a point of a shared set of symbols on particular animals representing particular politicians and so forth. And the trouble with that is, of course, is that if you don't know the key, you don't know which figures represent what, or indeed who the key politicians were of the day and what were the major issues that were confronted. Then you simply won't get to the point. You might even suppose seeing a picture of a zebra, a tortoise, and an ostrich deep in conversation, and that the artist had produced in a fantasy about life in a zoo. With an older cartoon, we don't understand. We smile. we shake our heads and turn to something more accessible. But when the same thing happens in the Bible, we often fail to realize what sort of document we are reading. And suppose that the writer intends every word to be taken in a kind of flat, literal fashion. That has been the fate in particular with this chapter, Mark 13, and others like it. Many have looked ahead through verses 24 through 27 and have noted the prediction of the sun and moon being darkened and the stars falling from the heavens, together with the Son of Man coming in a cloud with great glory and honor. They think, this must be the end of the world. This is the collapse of the cosmos. Creation is going to implode. Jesus will return and the world will cease to be. And Mark would look on, like a 19th century cartoon shaking his head at an incomprehensible 21st century reader saying, no, that's not how the language works. You don't know the Bible or the power of God. The sun, the moon, and the stars are regularly used in the Bible as its code for the power of the world, meaning in our day, the political power, and the passage quoted in 25 and 27, in fact, from Isaiah's description of the fall of Babylon. The coming of the Son of Man, as in verse 26, we shall deal with next week. In fact, the verses 1 through 23, the passages of which we focus here, make it quite clear what Jesus is warning about is the fall of Jerusalem and the terrifying events that will leap up to it. That's where the passage starts, with Jesus prophesying quite explicitly the destruction of the temple, and the disciples then asking about him, when will this happen? And how will they know? We should assume, granted this beginning, that the rest of the passage will constitute an answer or a set of answers to that question. The answer comes in the third main stage, or in three main stages. First, there will be a time of turmoil, plenty of worrying about things happening, but these will not be the key signs. Second, there will be a time when Jesus' followers are isolated, persecuted, misunderstood, and quite possibly killed. At times, the great political contention, people will refuse to join in with the currently fashionable mood, will be hated by everyone else. So this is a call to be patient. But third, there is a particular sign. Look at the prophet Daniel. In Daniel 9:37, he speaks of an abomination that desolates, something horrible and scandalous, that by her very presence caused the place to be like a wilderness. This is picked up in Daniel 11:31 and 12:11. What could this be? 2 centuries before the time of Jesus, and still vivid in folks' memory, the Syrian tyrant Antiochus Ephesus had turned to Jerusalem temple into a pagan shrine. Well, something like that would happen again. Perhaps it would be an emperor putting up a huge statue of himself and demanding, as in Daniel, that people worship it. That almost happened in AD 40 when the mad Roman Emperor Gaius Caligula turned forces such as things upon Jerusalem. But something like it would happen again. Of that there would be no doubt. Anybody living in Jerusalem and the Romans finally closed in at AD 69 and 70 before the temple's destruction would be able to see the sign. Romans stand being planted in the sacred precincts themselves. There would be a moment, Jesus declared, when you should get out and run. That makes no sense if Mark thought Jesus was talking about the end of the world. It makes every sense if you're facing an imminent enemy siege. And that's what happens. Don't be fooled. There will be plenty of would-be messiahs showing up, but they would not stay loyal to Jesus, even to this day. So, just summarizing this abomination of desolation passage in Mark, and it's in other Gospels as well. You know, a lot of people like to read that as the end of the world times. And what he's saying is, and rightly saying, is Jesus is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. That in AD 70, when the temple was destroyed, and in 68 and 69, as the Romans were closing in and standing guard on everything, this is our time to run. This is a time to save yourself. This has nothing to do with the end of the world. It was written for a specific time and a specific place for these people. And by AD 70, obviously, Jesus has been gone for 30, 35 years. The disciples, some of them were still around. He was telling them this was going to take place. Get ready for it. Be ready. Tell others when this takes place to run and get out of Jerusalem. And I'm sure they did. And, by this time, Paul had been around much earlier than this, in the 50s and 60s. So people had already known about all this stuff, but people, they were warned. They were warned ahead of time. So the lesson here is, let's not worry so much about this being end of world type stuff, but it being the end of Jerusalem. Yeah, there are rhymes, to use his words that we talked about earlier. There are rhythms to this passage that even equate to possibly things of today. It could happen again. But, as we read our Bible, we got to remember where this was written for. It was written for first century Jewish community who were looking for a Messiah and found it in Jesus, and he's warning them ahead of time of this disaster. Hope that makes some sense. So go forth this day in the peace and the love of Christ and have a great day.